This little video series is called Dying Dar's Way, Radically Real Spiels on the End of Life. I am in bed with my best friend from college, Susan Weiss, and we haven't even decided if we're going to release this one because I'm not sure I have the gumption, but I brought in the support team, so we're going to give this a try. We have been talking about what it looks like in the weeks and months prior to someone's death, and I thought we'd just go through the list because some people don't know what to expect, and if you haven't been with someone who's dying, you might actually do things that are painful or really unkind, encouraging them into behaviors and communicating this really beyond their ability to provide any longer. So anyway, say hi, Susan.
Hi, Susan.
How long ago did you lose your mom?
How long ago did I lose my mom? She died in 2013.
She died in 2013, and Susan's family did have some of these. Well, I guess you were all very open about having what I call the kitchen table conversations around end-of-life planning and so forth.
Yeah, no, we certainly did, and we certainly, both my parents had, good advance directives in place that they'd done with their attorneys.
Done everything right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think what we're leading up to is that you still can end up with something sort of shocking or unintended or not what you had planned
There
for.
you go, which doesn't mean you shouldn't have those conversations about end-of-life planning. But sometimes there's a wrench in the works.
Sometimes there's a wrench in the works.
Talk about it.
My mother's wrench in the works was that she developed colon cancer that she concealed from everyone.
Typical.
And typical of her, yes. And by the time her colon cancer was diagnosed, she had almost a complete blockage of her intestinal system. And basically, she was told the only option you have is surgery immediately to remove the obstruction. Mm-hmm. It was all very stunning. It was like we weren't given any sort of opportunity to sort of step back and say, does she want to have surgery? What's the option besides surgery? Because basically what was presented to us was there was no option. Mm-hmm. It was, be cut or die.
Well, surgery, right.
Yeah.
Surgery or just wait for death to come.
Right.
Okay.
And the waiting for death option wasn't given. My mother was perfectly coherent in her mind.
And age, remind me?
She was 90.
A very robust 90.
A very robust 90. And she told the surgeon, what did she tell him? I'm trying to remember. If you cut me open and there's cancer everywhere, just let me die on the table or something like that.
Very practical.
Yeah, and of
Sounds
course
familiar.
he said, I can't do that. I can't do that. So she survived the surgery, which was a big deal. Surgery, I think it'd be hard to survive if you were 19, let alone 90. But she was on a ventilator and non-responsive. So every time I would go into the ICU to visit her, right, the nurse would point to her DNR order.
Right. Do not resuscitate.
Do not resuscitate. And I would say, I understand that. She chose to have surgery. Can we give her a chance to,
right,
come out of the anesthesia? So I finally said to her, give me a time limit with her being on the
very
ventilator
mm-hmm,
and unconscious when we're talking about irreversible brain damage. And she said 5 days. So on the morning of the 5th day, I called my brother and I said, I think it's time. I think we're going to have to turn off the ventilator. Mm-hmm. So, of course, by the time we got to the ICU, my mother was off the ventilator and conscious.
Of course. This is so typical of her mother.
Yes. And she was remarkably intact mentally after all those days being out and under general anesthesia and so on, which can really send everybody for a loop.
Yeah, that's everything to me.
Yeah, so she survived that. She survived some pretty hideous nursing home care. She survived moving into a better facility. She was delighted to actually be told that she ended up with an ileostomy with the surgery. So
okay.
Not a colostomy, which is a little lower. Ileostomy is a little higher. She was actually approved to have a second surgery to reverse the ileostomy and reconnect.
Oh, wow.
And she was so excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
and then she had a big old heart attack and died.
Oh, well, how decent of her.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
But,
okay, so, yeah.
But this is kind of, I don't want to dominate the conversation or anything,
go
but
ahead.
part of what we've been talking about is the cost of care as you approach the end of your life.
Right.
I mean, medical care is extraordinarily expensive, and there's a super high percentage of it that the elderly population account for within the last few months of their life. Now, my mother, who was always pretty healthy and very opposed to seeking any sort of medical care, after her death, and we're probably talking about a 3 or 4 month period between surgery and death, I think the bills that were coming in amounted to about $250,000.
$250,000 for
For a 90-year-old woman
bit
who,
of life
yeah.
extension. Right. So Susan and I are very cautious to just tell our stories, and I to give my opinions and just say, you know, we're not telling you what to do. I obviously have chosen the natural path to death. Rather than a whole lot of intervention. But the important point is that every family should be having these conversations, unless you come from a culture where it's just not spoken of. But in this country, where we're so litigious and there's so many consequences and there's no national health care, you end up having to have these conversations or somebody suffers.
But I think, and I agree with you, but I think something else I've learned with my own experience with my parents and with friends' experiences with dying people is that you never know what you're going to do until it slaps you upside the head. You can have all the plans in the world, right? And then you get your diagnosis or you have your crisis, and then you actually have to make a decision, which might be different from what you thought your decision was going to be.
Right. Still have to have the conversation.
Yes, you still have to have the conversation. No argument.
So I would like to share with our listeners the typical signs and symptoms that death is coming up. And it may not have happen perfectly in this order, but you should know about them because there's an awful lot that nature gives us in the form of natural death preparation, which, if someone has decided to let go, the loved ones, the surrounding people, need to honor these as signals that death is coming, and that a dying person may have consciously chosen, you know, hoping to God that our brains are still working. You know, it doesn't work if you're well into dementia. But assuming that your brain is still working, it's good to just recognize the signs and have at least some kind of plans in place. I'm sure a lot of what you did was in accordance with these conversations.
Yes.
It was that last moment planning that you really couldn't plan for. So anyway, the first one on the list is diminishing appetite. And I can say that the hospice people have told me the biggest mistakes that people make are around trying to get somebody to eat, whose body is trying to say, no, I don't need all of this food anymore. I'm starting to close down shop. Another thing, and I'm definitely experiencing that. I'm like down to broth and toast now. Sleeping more is another one. Just that's just a very good sign. It's non-specific, but we just need more rest. We tend to be less social. Boy, am I there. I've got a friend who's scheduling my appointments for her, and I've just said, please don't schedule any more visitors. Like, I let my old college chum come. But for the most part, I don't have the energy or the desire to be social anymore. It's becoming,
do you find you're going more inward?
Very, definitely.
Okay.
And it isn't a suffering. That's what I want people to know. It is not a suffering for me to be more inward oriented now. It's comforting. It doesn't feel like isolation. It feels like peace. It's really quite beautiful. Then as we progress, changes in vital signs. You know, for me, the hospice workers are always taking my heart rate, and, you know, I'm breathing a little bit faster because my problem is stage 4 lung cancer, and they measure the circumference of my arms, which are getting pretty skinny.
I can almost go all the way.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty skinny. Changing toilet habits. You know, that's not something I really want to be talking about on a videotape, but I literally I almost don't have enough force inside my body to push out a proper fart anymore. And I know she's laughing. Can you tell we're good friends? And I think it's just part of the sort of general meltdown
General
with
shutdown, yeah.
with cancer that it hurts to pee, it hurts to poop, it hurts to fart. It's just generally I feel like I've lost the integrity of the tissues.
Right, and that's another reason why people shouldn't try and force food on
Don't
you thinking
force
it's kind,
food.
because your body's trying to go through a natural process.
It's a very mixed signal. You
Yeah.
talked about not giving water towards the end either, and it could. Now this is more in the active dying phase.
This was an active dying. This was someone who was actively dying, and we were told by the hospice people that it was unkind to actually try and force
It's
a
a mixed
fluid.
signal.
It's a mixed signal
Yeah.
because someone's actively dying, and food, any of those things kind of like bring you back. It like activates it.
It says
it's
live.
like eating a steak in front of someone who can't eat any food,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And so,
Right.
and that's why you're not supposed to really eat around people, or
I noticed that the smells. I mean, Roger
Yep.
brought his lunch into my bedroom today, and I was very happy to have him stop by. But yeah, just the smell of food and the crunching. Also, there's a little bit of jealousy still
sure.
going on. Like I see my friends walk up the sidewalk to come visit, or they're eating normal food, and it's like, I have to sit with this feeling and just acknowledge that I'm feeling a little bit left out here. So yeah, I'm just grateful my brain still works well enough and that I can give very specific requests to people. And either I'm a tyrant or just everybody is lined up properly. But for the most part, my loved ones are honoring all of these requests to just limit social engagement, not suggest food, not bring food that I can't eat. So I'm pretty lucky in this regard. As things progress, weakening muscles. I mean, I was still in December, I was still able to walk 10,000 steps a day. I sort of had to force myself because it's lung cancer, but I really wanted to make I have one little lung left. And I wanted to make it work, and now it's just out of the questions. I don't even leave the house most days. So then as you move further into active dying or towards active dying, you might have a drop in body temperature. There's whether it's lung cancer or not, there might be some changes in breathing. I do have to say the pain is increasing. I do take Tylenol now, and at some point I will switch over to morphine. And then we start seeing the brain symptoms in the form of confusion and ultimately hallucinations. And I'm a realist. I've been quite pragmatic, as you can tell, by making these videos and helping people understand what to expect. And I like knowing what the possibilities are and what's coming. Thank you for doing this with me.
thank you for letting me wash your hair.
Yeah. Oh, and she let me wash my hair. I had another girlfriend here today who wanted to help me, and I said, I just can't manufacture enough needs to satisfy all the friends that want to help me. But this is a beautiful time. Make no mistake about it. Dying is a beautiful time. Thanks.